What is your favorite joke in Douglas Adams Hitchhiker guidebooks? The major problem. One of the major problems, for there are several, one of the many major problems with governing people is that of whom you get to do it, or rather of who manages to get people to let them do it to them. To summarize, it is a well-known fact that those people who must want to rule people are, ipso facto, those least suited to do it. To summarize the summary, anyone who is capable of getting themselves made president should on no account be allowed to do the job. To summarize the summary of the summary, people are a problem. It's actually really early, reasonably close quote. The Vogon constructor fleet hung in the air exactly the way bricks don't. It's just such a great way to evoke the utter strangeness of these blunt force ships and their presence in the sky above. He had found a new Tremotic machine which had provided him with a plastic cup filled with a liquid that was almost, but not quite, entirely unlike tea. In the beginning, the universe was created. This made a lot of people very angry and has been widely regarded as a bad move.
You know, said Arthur, it's at times like this, when I'm trapped in a wagon I lots with a man from Betelgeuse, and about to the of asphyxiation in the space that I really wish I'd listened to what my mother told me when I was young. Well, what did SHE tell you? I don't know, I didn't listen.
But the plans were on display. On display? I eventually had to go down to the cellar to find them. That's the display department. With a flashlight. Ah, well, the lights had probably gone. So had the stairs. But look, you found the notice, didn't you? Yes, said Arthur, yes I did. It was on display in the bottom of a locked filing cabinet stuck in a disused lavatory with a sign on the door saying, "Beware of the leopard." I also like Ford's, "Time is an illusion, lunchtime doubly so." I don't think you need go further than the opening para. Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies an utterly insignificant yellow sun. Orbiting this at a distance of roughly 93 million miles is a small blue-green planet whose ape descendant life forms are so amazingly primitive that they still think digital watches are a pretty neat idea. The part where the people who crash-landed on Earth adopted leaves as currency, which obviously led to massive inflation. Then to combat the inflation, they decided to conduct a deforestation program. It's just so fucking stupid in the best way possible. A common mistake that people make when trying to design something completely foolproof is to underestimate the ingenuity of complete fools. Mostly harmless. Man had always assumed that he was more intelligent than dolphins because he had achieved so much, the wheel, New York, wars and so on, whilst all the dolphins had ever done was muck about in the water having a good time. But conversely, the dolphins had always believed that they were far more intelligent than man, for precisely the same reasons. Zapod, in case we don't make it, I just want you to know something. I respect you. Just, not very much. The invisibility technology, making a spaceship invisible by covering it in the same material that other people's problems are made of. When Ford, I think, says something is unpleasantly like being drunk. What's so bad about being drunk? You ask a glass of water. Totally went over my head when I first read it. I was thinking, maybe someone hungover drinks a glass of water? Then realized drunk here means the act of drinking, not being inebriated. Click. Arthur, so how smart are you? Marvin the robot, think of a number. Arthur, okay. Marvin, wrong. There is an art, it says, or rather an act of flying. The knack lies in learning how to throw yourself at the ground and miss. Pick a nice day, it suggests, and try it. The first part is easy. Asterisk. Curiously enough, the only thing that went through the mind of the bowl of petunias as it fell was "oh no, not again." Had me dying as a kid. I love the exchange with the cow in the restaurant at the end of the universe, especially. I'll just nip off and shoot myself. Don't worry, I'll be very humane. The guy that Arthur kept inadvertently killing the sperm whale falling out of the sky with the bowl of petunias. The sperm whale is abruptly brought into consciousness as it hurtles to the round ground. I wonder if it will be friends with me? And the rest, after a sudden wet thud, was silence. Followed of course by, curiously enough, the only thing that went through the mind of the bowl of petunias as it fell was, oh no, not again. Many people have speculated that if we knew exactly why the bowl of petunias had thought that we would know a lot more about the nature of the universe than we do now on Disaster Area's stunt ship. How many lifeboats are there? None. Did you count them? Twice. Ford, you're turning into a penguin. Stop it. If you ever find you need help again, you know, if you are in trouble, need a hand out of a tight corner, please, don't hesitate to get lost. I have detected, he said, disturbances in the Washington. Arthur asked him to repeat what he had just said because he hadn't quite understood his meaning. Ford repeated it. The wash? Said Arthur. The space-time wash, said Ford. Arthur nodded, and then cleared his throat. Are we talking about, he asked cautiously, some sort of Vogon laundromat, or what are we talking about? Eddies, said Ford, in the space-time continuum. Ah, nodded Arthur, is he? What? Said Ford. Who, said Arthur, is Eddie, then, exactly, then, so many, but I think the name Slartibartfast has to be up there with one of the best creations of 20th century art. It's just pleasing to read. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy described the marketing department of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation as a bunch of mindless jerks who will be the first against the wall when the revolution comes. Curiously, an edition of the Encyclopedia Galactica which fell through a rift in the time-space continuum from 1,000 years in the future describes the marketing department of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation as a bunch of mindless jerks who were the first against the wall when the revolution came. Eddie's in the space-time continuum. Oh, so this is his sofa, is it? The point is, you see, said Ford, that there is no point in driving yourself mad trying to stop yourself going mad. You might just as well give in and save your sanity for later. Ford warns Arthur that beaming up to the ship is unpleasantly like being drunk. Arthur asks, what is so bad about being drunk? Ford replies, ask a glass of water. Poor Mervyn, finally getting to read God's final message to his creation. Spoiler alert. It was. We apologize for the inconvenience. We got one question for ya Beeblebrox. Alright, fire away, asterisk. Brief burst of laser fire asterisk. Oh god, it was really dumb, sorry, misunderstanding there. After an entire chapter wax poetic asterisk. It's a strange thing that no matter how it tasted, or what's its composition, that the spelling itself was irrelevant. Every civilization had created some alcoholic drink called a gin and tonic and had created said drink before making contact with the larger universe. Absolutely brilliant. The bit where the spaceship powered entirely by bad news was so exceedingly unwelcome whenever it arrived anywhere, that there was no point going there in the first place. I butchered it, but that's the gist. Not a joke, per se. But in the restaurant at the end of the universe, when Arthur realizes the Neanderthals are part of the machine and tries to tap into his own subconscious, only to pull what is 6x9 out of the Scrabble bag. Just the sort of absolute defeat and absurdity that after all this, all that our heroes have been though, one can only say, yup. If you took a couple of David Bowies and stuck one of the David Bowies on the top of the other David Bowie, then attached another David Bowie to the end of each of the arms of the upper of the first two David Bowies and wrapped the whole business up in a dirty beach robe, you would then have something which didn't exactly look like John Watson, but which those who knew him would find hauntingly familiar. I always loved the overwrought description of Wonko the Sane, and as he drove on, the rain clouds dragged down the sky after him, for, though he did not know it, Rob McConnell was a rain god. All he knew was that his working days were miserable and he had a succession of lousy holidays. All the clouds knew was that they loved him and wanted to be near him, to cherish him, and to water him. Ford arguing with an Earth telephone operator desperately trying to get her to patch his call from the Pleiades through to the speaking clock, in an attempt to bankrupt a sales merchant whose ship he was traveling on by leaving the call connected to rack up a huge phone bill. Don't you try to out-weird me. I get stranger things than you free with my breakfast cereal. I absolutely love the eating biscuits in a train station story which Arthur tells Fenchurch. And I love even more the true version of it that Adams shared in later stories. I'm being circumspect here, because anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about really needs to search it out, and it would be criminal for me to ruin it. When Wowbagger the infinitely prolonged drops in on Arthur to insult him, "You're a jerk, Dent, a complete knee-biter," and then just leaves Arthur standing there, wondering what just happened. It's actually on the dust jacket, and I'm hoping I'm remembering this correctly. How the Hitchhiker's Guide was devised. Douglas Adams was lying in a field in Innsbruck after having asked directions of someone visiting the city, but they were deaf. It turns out, the next person he asked for directions, coincidentally was also deaf, and Adams couldn't communicate with them either. He went around the corner and saw the sign outside a hotel welcoming people to a deaf convention. Exasperated, he bought a bottle of something to drink and pass out in a park. The Triganic Poo is a unit of galactic currency, with an exchange rate of 8 ningus to 1 poo. This is simple enough, but, since a ningi is a triangular rubber coin 6,800 miles along each side, no one has ever collected enough to own 1 poo. Ninjas are not negotiable currency, because the Galactibanks refuse to deal in fiddling small change. "Listen, bud," said Ford, "if I had $1 for every time I heard one bit of the universe look at another bit of the universe and say, 'That's terrible,' I wouldn't be sitting here like a lemon looking for a gin." Reading through the comments, they're all gems, and I love that people love them like I do. Hitchhiker's Guide made a huge impression. I think I found it shortly after I realized there was a library in bicycling distance from my house. I vividly remember, which probably means I vividly misremember, lying on the carpet in front of the window and reading the entire thing. It was the first book I couldn't put down. Then I went straight back and checked out the sequel. It was a revelation that there could be more than just a story, that someone could be so clever to arrange words that way, to construct sentences like the ones being quoted here, with every clause building up the joke and then hitting you with, "Beware of the leopard." There's a formative age where you find something you feel is speaking directly to you, and this was it for me. All the more so because nobody around me seemed to get it. But to answer the question, I'll add the one I misquote frequently as my philosophy for procrastination. Yeah, so if you'd taken the trouble to think about the problem a bit longer, it would have gone away. It's also such a great bit of writing. We're just being introduced to Zapod, after we got one of those wonderfully digressive explanations from the book that humans can survive 30 seconds in the vacuum of space and that Arthur and Ford were rescued after 29 seconds. And so packed in one sentence is not only two double meanings to make my inner 12-year-old laugh, but it also captures Zapod's personality as being a narcissistic asshole, and exemplifies how he speaks in these sort of dismissive, offhand remarks. Love the way he writes. He's science fiction Pratchett. Equal mixture of profound insight into the quirks of humanity, wildly imaginative chaos, and linguistically masterful hilarity. My favorites that haven't been mentioned yet. This man is the bee's knees, Arthur. He is the wasp's nipples. He is, I would go so far as to say, the entire set of erogenous zones of every major flying insect of the Western world. Also, but the plans were on display. on display? I eventually had to go down to the cellar to find them. That's the display department. With a flashlight. Ah, well, the lights had probably gone. So had the stairs. But look, you found the notice, didn't you? Yes, said Arthur. Yes, I did. It was on display in the bottom of a locked filing cabinet stuck in a disused lavatory with a sign on the door saying, "Beware of the leopard." Also, since we decided a few weeks ago to adopt the leaf as legal tender, we have, of course, all become immensely rich. The Babel fish proving the non-existence of God. This is from the original radio series, and subsequent TV series. I don't know if it was also included the book version later. I always liked God's final words written in fire at the end of the universe. We apologize for the inconvenience. Looks like a fish, moves like a fish, steers like a cow. Space is big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the chemists, but that's just peanuts to space. Hot Black Desiato spending a year dead for tax purposes. This planet has, or rather had, a problem, which was this: most of the people living on it were unhappy for pretty much of the time. Many solutions were suggested for this problem, but most of these were largely concerned with the movements of small green pieces of paper, which is odd because on the whole it wasn't the small green pieces of paper that were unhappy. You had to live through the 80s for this one, but it made me laugh. For Arthur, who could usually contrive to feel self-conscious if left alone for long enough with a Swiss cheese plant, the moment was one of sustained revelation. He felt on the sudden like a cramped and zoo-born animal who awakes one morning to find the door to his cage hanging quietly open and the savannah stretching gray and pink to the distant rising sun, while all around new sounds are waking. Arthur pressed an invitingly large red button. The storm had now definitely abated, and what thunder there was now grumbled over more distant hills, like a man saying, "And another thing," 20 minutes after admitting he's lost the argument. He hoped and prayed that there wasn't an afterlife. Then he realized there was a contradiction involved. He merely hoped that there wasn't an afterlife. In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry and been widely regarded as a bad move. A common mistake that people make when trying to design something completely foolproof is to underestimate the ingenuity of complete fools. If space is infinite, but there are only a finite amount of inhabitable planets, the average population of the universe is 0. Therefore, any person you may happen to meet is merely a figment of your imagination. Oh, Freddled grunt bugly, thy mixturations are to me as blurtled gabblebleachets on a lurged bee. Group, I implore thee, my frunting turlingdromes, and hoopiously drangle me with crinkly biddlewordles, or I shall rend thee in the gobberwarts with my blurgle crunch on sea. If I don't. Apologies for any errors, couldn't be arsed to check the spelling. There is an art, it says, or rather, a knack to flying. The knack lies in learning how to throw yourself at the ground and miss. Clearly, it is the second part, the missing, which presents the difficulties. Finally they compose themselves, and Benji moved forward to address Arthur. Now, Earth creature, he said, the situation we have in effect is this. We have, as you know, been more or less running your planet for the last 10 million years in order to find this wretched thing called the ultimate question. Why? Said Arthur sharply. No, we already thought of that one, said Frankie interrupting. I often think about the entire chapter of The Fly that couldn't get out of the window. It also can stand alone outside the books, I think. Such a perfect metaphor for writer's block. It's been ages since I read them, was like 13 years old at the time, but I remember being extremely amused by a sequence where the robot tries to go around the spaceship, and the doors are being unbelievably sassy. The ship's hung in the sky in much the same way that bricks don't. Maybe my favorite line in literature. The ravenous bug bladder beast of Troil is a vicious wild animal from the planet of Troil, known for its never-ending hunger and its mind-boggling stupidity. One of the main features of the beast is that if you can't see it, it assumes it can't see you. Slardibard fast, come. Come now or you will be late. Arthur, late? What for? Slardibard fast. What is your name, human? Arthur, Dent. Arthur Dent. Slardibard fast. Late as in the late Dent Artordent. It's a sort of threat, you see. I've never been terribly good at them myself, but I'm told they can be terribly effective. Zapod's just this guy, you know? I tried to come up with a favorite, but there are just too many. I can't. The books have more absolute crackers in a page than most supposedly funny books have in their entire length. I've always loved the list of what you can do with a towel, but my favorite use is to avoid the gaze of the ravenous bug-bladder beast of Troll, such a mind-bogglingly stupid animal. It assumes that if you can't see it, it can't see you. Finally my dawes has come. My username. Deep thought in the meaning of everything. 42. Just brilliant. Colin the robot swooning and gurgling, even in the face of his own torment and destruction. It seemed to me, said Wonko the Sane, that any civilization that had so far lost its head as to need to include a set of detailed instructions for use in a package of toothpicks was no longer a civilization in which I could live and stay sane. Not in the books as such, but still my favorite. I listened to the original series on the radio when it was first broadcast. It was the 1970s and some things were certain. The UK economy was in the toilet. Most things were painted brown or orange and someone at the BBC had shares in Pink Floyd. It didn't matter what documentary or show it was. You could be sure that somewhere there would be a bit of Floyd. I was, and still am, a huge fan, but it just seemed a bit predictable. Then along came Hitchhikers. With only the occasional lapse, Jean-Michel Jarre. The first few episodes managed to avoid the usual sci-fi cliches. Then came Fit the Third and our heroes are walking out across the surface of the legendary planet of Magradia. And there was the unmistakable sounds of the introduction to Shine On You Crazy Diamond. I felt a momentary tinge of disappointment. Even the HHGTTG had succumbed. And then Arthur said, "Do you know that robot can hum like Pink Floyd?" At that moment I just knew that Douglas Adams was a genius. My favorite running joke is how no one listens to Marvin. Like when he said that he could see the question on Arthur's brain waves, but nobody was listening. He's the type of guy who's so annoying whenever he appears after a long absence. He's immediately annoying. Isn't it enough to see that a garden is beautiful without having to believe that there are fairies at the bottom of it too? That the society of intellectual elites ends up being wiped out by a pandemic that one of their exiled, useless telephone sanitizers would have prevented. I've always been partial to the award for the gratuitous use of the word Belgium. Face rolling on the floor laughing, face rolling on the floor laughing, where Marvin gets the tank to guess what they sent him out with, and the tank gets so mad it kills itself, ironically proving that Marvin could in fact stop the tank. The secret to flying is to throw yourself at the ground and miss. The lorry driver, who is also a rain god, Agrajag, is a creature, or consciousness, who continuously reincarnates into different forms throughout the timeline, and is killed by Arthur Dent in every one. When he confronts Arthur and you realize that so many previous lines that didn't initially make sense were about him being killed, it's one of the longest setups for a joke possible. Goddamn, such good writing. https://hitchhikers.fandom.com/wiki/agrajag https://hitchhikers.fandom.com/wiki/agrajag. Everything about Wonko the Sane, his origin of seeing toothpick instructions and determining that the world was insane, and how he creates the asylum house being the top aspects. This is exactly the Reddit thread I needed today. Time is an illusion. Lunchtime doubly so. Flying is the art of throwing yourself to the floor and missing. Fanny, after explaining she'd been named Fenchurch because she was conceived at Fenchurch Street Station, saying that her parents said that you won't believe how bored it's possible to get while waiting in a queue there. I know that astrology isn't a science, said Gail. Of course it isn't. It's just an arbitrary set of rules like chess or tennis or, what's that strange thing you British play? Cricket? Self-loathing? Parliamentary democracy. Slardibardfast, come. Come now or you will be late. Arthur, late? What for? Slardibardfast. What is your name, human? Arthur, Dent. Arthur Dent. Slardibardfast. Late as in the late Dentartordent. It's a sort of threat, you see. I've never been terribly good at them myself, but I'm told they can be terribly effective. The meaning of life being 42, which is an asterisk in ASCII, which means anything and everything. Ford. It's rather unpleasantly like being drunk. Arthur. What's wrong with being drunk? Ford. Ask a glass of water.